El día de hoy estamos grabando aquí con mi brother, el Uncle Saki. Uncle Saki, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Carlos García.
We are recording from Madrid. We are about to take the classes. So, have a good day.
Vamos.
Bienvenidos a Porque soy tu madre. Hablemos de liderazgo sin rodeos. El día de hoy estamos en Madrid. Y a mí estos compadres me parecen, bueno, en general España, como un buen lugar para hablar de virtualidad. Por dos cosas. La primera, porque pues yo me pregunto, estos compadres por ahí de los 1500 tenían 4 virreinados, no había celulares, no había nada de estas cositas y dominaban pues casi todo un continente, ¿no? Ellos no estaban preocupados con que sí se habrá levantado, ya estará haciendo lo que tiene que hacer, ojalá nos entregue el trabajito que le dejamos. No, y dominaron casi todo un continente, entre otras cositas. Y la segunda, que me parece importante grabar eso desde aquí, es que precisamente en el IE School yo estudié mi MBA, yo soy la generación COVID, entonces pues realmente yo no hubiera podido estudiar el MBA si no hubiera sido por la modalidad remota.
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
El tema del día de hoy a mí me apasiona. Bienvenidos a Porque soy tu madre. Hablemos de liderazgo sin rodeos.
Porque soy tu madre.
Personalmente, yo amo la virtualidad. Porque de alguna u otra manera, yo soy producto de la virtualidad. Yo vivo en un país, trabajo en otro. Gracias a la virtualidad, pues yo pude estudiar aquí en Madrid, en una modalidad híbrida, en donde tuvimos clases remotas, pero pues también tuvimos la parte de la inmersión aquí y en otros países. La virtualidad para mí, la realidad, me cambió la vida. Y me la cambió para bien. Pero también tengo amigos que tienen empresas o que son CEOs y demás y dijeron, ¿virtualidad? No, virtualidad a la mierda. O sea, aquí no va a haber virtualidad. Aquí los quiero ver a todos y aquí quiero otra vez que empecemos a trabajar de lunes a viernes y con los horarios normales.
Do me a fucking favor. Shut up, listen and learn.
Y yo me ponía a pensar que creo que las dos partes tienen verdad, pero también creo que ellos tienen un punto muy importante y muy relevante. Porque yo creo que la virtualidad es para adultos. La virtualidad no es cosa de niños. Y me explico. Lo platicamos con Andrés en el episodio 1, en la entrevista. Y entonces él decía, cuando entramos a la virtualidad, yo pensé que las generaciones pues, más grandes les iba a costar más el poder estar pegados a una máquina o el manejar o el concentrarse. Y a las generaciones más jóvenes, pues todo este mundo pues, se les va a facilitar. Y lo que él platicaba es que las generaciones más grandes, pues lo único que tuvieron que hacer fue dominar la tecnología, pero ya tienen ese chip como de la disciplina y el autocontrol. A diferencia de las generaciones más jóvenes que no traen tanto ese chip y que además se distraen muy fácilmente.
El mensaje es muy simple. Cuando tú
¡Un pajarito!
Y yo por eso digo que esto es una cosa de adultos. ¿Por qué? Porque realmente si tú vas a tener un esquema híbrido de trabajo o un esquema en donde tienes virtualidad, pues tienes que entender si tu equipo está lo suficientemente maduro para poder regularse y para poder realmente concentrarse y seguir aportando y seguir dando resultados a la empresa. Porque ¿qué te da la virtualidad? La virtualidad tiene una belleza. Tú puedes estar donde sea y puedes trabajar, ¿no? O sea, finalmente, por ejemplo, yo pues podría estar en Alaska, pero mientras cumpla con todo lo que tengo que entregar con mi empresa, mientras yo cumpla mis reuniones, pues realmente la empresa dice, pues está bien, güey, ¿no? Bueno, excepto algunas cosas que sí las tengo que hacer en físico. Pero de resto, no hay tanta bronca. Pero eso conlleva una responsabilidad, que es la típica de los memes, que está la morra acá en una cámara de bronceado tomando una reunión o esas cosas. Pues ahí es donde se va perdiendo como todo este hilo y digamos que como todo este profesionalismo, que finalmente creo que eso es lo que se debe cuidar. Esa es la palabra clave que se debe cuidar en todo este rollo, el profesionalismo. Que tú seas realmente profesional y que tú seas realmente lo suficientemente maduro para poder entregar este resultado. Te voy a contar algo que me sucedió hace poco y es caso de la vida real. O sea, hicimos algunas pláticas ahí con mis equipos de trabajo y como ya sabes que Radio Pasillo es una belleza, pues me enteré que una persona que trabaja en nuestro equipo comentó que qué bueno que estábamos en un esquema híbrido porque en la oficina vamos lunes, miércoles y un viernes sí y un viernes no. Entonces esta persona decía que qué bueno que estamos en esa modalidad porque los martes y los jueves pues le da tiempo de cortar el pelo y le da el tiempo de hacer algunas otras cositas para algún ingreso extra. Ay, cabrón. O sea, dices, ¿neta? O sea, es que no se trata de eso. La virtualidad es como cuando estabas tú ya en la noche, que estabas chavito y que estabas en la noche en tu casa y estaban todos los adultos ahí platicando y tu mamá te volteaba a ver con la mirada a la 14 y te decía, órale vas, ya te puedes ir a tu cuarto porque esto es cosa de adultos. Así es la virtualidad. ¿Qué es lo que siempre sucede en una reunión que es virtual? Pues por lo general algunos prenden la cámara, otros no. Y tú sabes que muchos van a estar haciendo otra cosa. Ya lo sabes. Si eso ya lo sabes, pues valdrá la pena preguntarse dos cositas. La primera, pues si están haciendo alguna otra cosa y a ti no te importa, pues probablemente no tiene sentido el que hagas esa reunión. Porque entonces, ¿para qué la haces? No tiene ningún sentido. Pero la otra parte es, si esa reunión es para comunicar o esa reunión es para hacer acuerdos, tiene algún fin. Y lo mejor es evidentemente que la cámara esté prendida y que estén poniendo atención. ¿Estás de acuerdo? Porque el objetivo va a ser algún acuerdo o comunicar algo y tú debes estar muy seguro de que lo que estás diciendo realmente le está llegando al emisor. Para mí, cuando no prenden la cámara, es como si yo hiciera esto. O sea, si yo me volteara de espaldas y pues no te hago caso, o sea, yo estoy viendo acá otra cosa y tú por allá, pues puedes seguir hablando. Por eso dijimos que la virtualidad es cosa de adultos. Yo en lo personal lo que hago es, mis reuniones son todos con cámara prendida. De alguna forma también lo que hago es de manera random pregunto qué dije, ¿no? Dime qué dije. Y trato siempre como de al final hacer como un wrap up de decir, vimos esto, esto, esto y esto, dudas. Porque si no, de verdad no tiene ningún sentido. Y ahí es donde la virtualidad pues empieza a desvirtuar. Básicamente, las reglas de la virtualidad es como cuando tu mamá te decía, mientras tú vivas en mi techo, vas a seguir mis reglas. Y es básicamente eso. Mientras tú estés vinculado a una empresa, no importa que estés de manera virtual o presencial, pues hay ciertas reglas que se deben seguir. Pero esas reglas finalmente son pues, para una mejor convivencia y a una mayor eficiencia. Hay 5 métricas importantes para medir la eficiencia del trabajo remoto. La primera, productividad individual. Es decir, el número de tareas o proyectos completados dentro de los plazos establecidos. ¿Sí? Porque es crucial saber si los empleados están siendo eficientes o no. Es decir, realmente están cumpliendo en tiempo lo que se tiene que hacer, cuántos proyectos sacamos. ¿Esta cantidad de proyectos sería la misma que si estuvieran de manera virtual o si estuvieran aquí? El segundo es la calidad del trabajo. Es decir, cuántos errores y correcciones son necesarias, ¿no? Es decir, asegurar que la calidad del trabajo no disminuya debido a la virtualidad. Esto sucede sobre todo en inducción de personas nuevas. Ahí sí es mejor muchas veces estar face to face que de manera virtual. ¿Por qué? Porque es más fácil corregir y es más fácil estar viendo lo que está sucediendo. Pero de manera regular deberíamos entender cuánto tenemos de errores y correcciones y si esto es mejor o peor dependiendo si estás remoto o si estás en el sitio de trabajo. El tercero es comunicación y colaboración. Es decir, frecuencia y eficacia en la comunicación. Y aquí tiene que ver el tiempo de respuesta y la participación de las reuniones. Es decir, si a ti te preguntan algo, pues finalmente, aunque estés remoto, tienes que estar 100% disponible. Es decir, te estoy preguntando y va. Muchas veces yo digo que estás hasta más presente. Bueno, a mí me pasa, todo el tiempo me están escribiendo y eso es mucho más rápido que cuando estoy en la oficina, ven que estoy con gente y entonces les digo, no, pues vente al rato, ¿no? Pero pues cuando estás en virtualidad, pues llegó el mensaje ahí, medio lo ves y contestas. Es importante la comunicación y la colaboración. ¿Por qué? Porque en la colaboración algo que hay que cuidar es la cohesión del equipo. Yo sí creo que un esquema híbrido ayuda mucho. O sea, ir algunos días y otros no. En esos días que vas, entiendes otra vez dónde perteneces y entiendes la empresa y vuelves como a tener esa cohesión con tu equipo. Muchas veces no tanto para la resolución de problemas, pero sí para la cohesión, para, ok, pertenezco a esto. Es más, muchas veces con eso entiendes o recuerdas el tamaño de la empresa. Otro punto importante que se debe medir es la satisfacción del empleado. Es decir, tu gente, cómo se sienten trabajando de una forma remota. ¿Por qué? Porque con esto tú puedes garantizar el compromiso y evitar la rotación. Realmente esta parte de la cuestión remota se ha vuelto de alguna manera hasta como una prestación. De tal forma que si ves los KPIs que te estoy diciendo, abarcan productividad, pero también de alguna manera el bienestar de las personas. Hubo un caso en Nueva York con unos compadres que se llaman Sansa Kitchen. Y estos compas lo que hicieron es como tipo de comida rápida. Entonces lo que hicieron era los cajeros, los que te atendían, pues realmente eran una pantalla. Ellos se encontraban en Filipinas. Y entonces tú llegabas y el cajero realmente pues no estaba ahí, pero pues te trataba normal, ¿no? Como una persona. Y entonces pues tú le hacías tu orden y demás, la tomaba y te la daba. Lo que estoy diciendo es que con la virtualidad tienes el mundo a tus pies. Porque puedes contratar talento en cualquier lugar y donde realmente ese talento te pueda ofrecer lo que estás necesitando. Una parte como más común es, si tú estás en el negocio de la moda, pues te convendría contratar gente que probablemente viva en Barcelona o en Nueva York o en algunos lugares de México, Colombia. ¿Por qué? Pues porque se respira otro ambiente diferente a en ciudades o países más chicos. De tal forma que yo te diría, ten en tu equipo los que hacen eco con tu empresa y de alguna forma que no te importe en dónde están. Siempre va a haber algunos puestos o posiciones que tienen que estar de manera local, incluso yendo de lunes a viernes. Pero identifica muy bien quiénes son esas personas que pueden estar en algún otro lugar y que te pueden aportar mucho más valor que yendo a la oficina de lunes a viernes. Nuestra invitada del día de hoy es Elisha y ella tiene un talento especial para administrar el talento de las empresas y su empresa opera 100% remoto. Speaking of that, please tell me your experience with this virtual world that we are living now.
Yeah, so I've been leading remote like most people since COVID. So I was largely always in office 5 days a week. I was at a company that wouldn't dream of remote work, but I did start to have to work with remote colleagues because I was working a lot with our warehouses. And then I had a team of folks in Germany. So I was starting to get a taste of having to work with people remotely. So I think I was a little more prepared going into COVID of like, I've worked with remote teams, but it was a big shift. And I think my opinion on it has definitely changed from then through now. I'm starting a new role right now that is fully remote. They have offices in certain areas, but they are fully dedicated to remote hiring.
Nice. Which are the main challenges that you have with your team or with your company?
Yeah, I think the things that I think about are there are challenges, I think, two different ways. There are challenges for people that made the transition from in-office to remote. And when those folks are on your team, and that I think there are people that still struggle with it. They're not good at, you have to build relationships differently. So they're not good at keeping conversations or chats. There's some of the things that get cited when companies say they want to go back into the office, right? They're like, oh, the water cooler chat. And you absolutely can still get that, but not everybody is good at maintaining that sort of relationship and having chats and conversations. So I think there are those folks that you have on your teams that do kind of just pull inward. And so you are going to miss that connection. And then I think when you hire new people, the challenge is in getting them onboarded. I think onboarding becomes such a large task. And I don't think a lot of managers and hiring managers think of it as a task that they're supposed to do. I think they think, oh, it's the training team or it's the recruiting team or it's the onboarding team. And then they get to their doorstep and they're like, okay, you do your job now. But they haven't facilitated those relationships. And if you don't onboard somebody into your team, that person is never going to feel like a true part of it. And like you build your team that way. So hopefully your team reaches out, but ultimately it's on you. And I think that is a big challenge of making sure that you're overcoming that to making sure that they feel like they're a part of that team coming in.
How, Elisha? How is a question that we need to solve today? Because how could you do that? Because physically, even if you say, let's go to have lunch, you cannot.
Yeah.
So how can you build that relationship? That I fully agree is our responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, I think I kind of think about it two ways. Is it's what you do with your team and then what you do with that person. So I always say, I think this applies in a lot of parts, but I say you need to meet people where they are. So you need to be involved enough with a manager to understand how your team likes to communicate. Is your team a group that they love a virtual happy hour? They want to get together, they want to chat. I had two teams under me. One team loved that. One team hated it. It was so painful for them. They were like, it's so uncomfortable. It's so awkward. So I needed to know, forcing them to come to this isn't going to create this team camaraderie. It's not going to make them feel like a team. But what they had was a really robust, we used Slack for our chatting. We had a channel. They had things they posted all the time. They were very active. So I made sure I was also active in there and that we were talking. So you need to meet your teams where they are. You need to know how they like to communicate. Do they like to get together and eat lunch together and chat? Do they like to plan an activity? What do they like to do to get to know each other? Work stuff aside, we all know how to onboard an employee and teach them how to do the job. But what doesn't come automatically in a remote environment is building that relationship of knowing somebody outside of their job. So hearing them talk about the way they interact with other people, knowing how they like to be talked to, how they like to interact, how they sound, talking one-on-one and casually, not just email speak and text speak. And I think that's what's important. It's important to know that for your new hire. How do they like to communicate? Are you chatting with them in one-on-ones about their life, their personal bit before you get into the work, but also your team? And what is the culture of your team? And how do you bring that person into that culture?
You said you have a chat, one team. In this chat, can they post whatever they want? Or there's rules, whatever. It's like
No, we're very open, very open. Okay. So it's like you went on vacation, like here, show us the pics from your vacation. We want to see where you went. It was your daughter's birthday. Show us the pictures from your daughter's birthday. You need to vent about something happening in the company. Like it's a safe space to vent. We're a team that works, I have a team that is like a little bit in service to another team. So like you have a frustration that is very common among our whole team. It's open, put it in there. It's not mean. It's more of a like bonding way of, I have to reschedule all these interviews today and it's going to take forever. Everybody canceled last minute. We all know what that feels like. They know what that feels like. And it's a bonding moment for them. And it helps just build that camaraderie, the thing that you'd get by sitting next to somebody in an office and chatting with them and asking them how their weekend was.
you said a very crucial thing. How do you recruit that people? How do you say these people, the profile of these people is going to work in my team or in the company? How do you detect that?
Yeah, so I always find when I'm asking questions, I like to hear when people talk about how they've worked with other people. I don't specifically say, tell me how you work with other people, but in their examples, yes, I want to know what their role was, but I listen for how they speak about other people. So when you say I worked with a team on this, or I went to this person, how are they talking about how they collaborate? It is a little bit to me a flag. Yes, I want somebody to talk themselves up in an interview. I don't want them to downplay what they did. But if they never mention working with other people or reaching out or how they seek help, that is a little bit of a flag to me, especially in a remote world, because if you think you can solve everything by yourself in a vacuum, that's probably not true. Maybe there is a role, but for my teams, we're very cross-functional. I'm working across a lot of other teams. My team maintains tools that other teams work on. So we need to be talking to them. We need to be working with them. And so you can't do it heads down. So I think about that in an interview. I also think about I always like to ask what they do when they get stuck. And I don't mean this to be a gotcha. This isn't a pretend you have never had a fault ever. You've never got stuck. I actually want to know, yeah, you go think about it, you Google it, you do what you can, but how do you reach out and who do you reach out to? Because I appreciate when somebody reaches out, not just to their manager, but I ask my coworkers, I ask somebody on another team. I like to hear that they're using their resources.
Do you think that, okay, I'm going to tell you, I was speaking with one of my friends, and he said, I was amazed that in the beginning, I thought that the younger generations are going to be more into virtuality, and the X generation is going to take much more effort to do it. And in his experience was the other way around, because everything was about tools. So the X generation, for instance, they learn about these programs or apps, and they go, okay, now I wake up the same time and I have the same routine as always. But the younger generations, they get distracted very easily. It's what he's saying. So in your experience, has something to do the age or the generation, and how can you work with that?
Yeah, I do have. So I have the teams that are under me. I tend to have a team that is very common for it to be early career folks that just graduated. Maybe this is their first job, maybe it's their second job. And I have seen that change over the years of how I kind of bring them into a team. I think what I'm seeing with folks that are younger nowadays is they've been raised a bit more in a remote world. And I found that I've had to almost coax them out of a shell a bit more, which I wouldn't expect, right? They're always online, they're always talking to people, but they're always doing it through a device. And that's obviously doesn't apply to everybody. People could be having a different experience. But what I've seen with the folks that are earlier in career, they weren't ever subjected to some of the things that we were. You're an intern and it's a bunch of people in an office and everyone is more senior than you and everyone's more important than you, but you have to talk to people. Yes. And that's not really the case. And so it is a little harder for that generation because they weren't forced into that, for better or for worse. So they aren't taking the extra steps to reach out. So when they want to, a lot of people, I have a team that they don't stay on my team very long. It's kind of like they see it as a stepping stone, which is very natural. That's great. I like to help them move on. But what I used to see is I'd ask folks what kind of teams they want to move to, and they'd always know. They're like, I'm interested in moving into operations. I'm interested into learning, moving to learn. They don't know what other teams do at the company. They don't know. I don't know what I want to do. I like this kind of work, but I don't know what that team does, or I don't know what that team does. So I'm finding that their lack of forced interaction that we all had in an office means that they don't necessarily know. It's something I'd been talking to, the other managers on my team of how can we actually help? Yeah, yes, we can tell them, go reach out to people. the really hard thing to cold reach out, put a coffee chat on somebody's calendar you've never met before. So we talked about how can we facilitate that? How can we bring folks in? How can we facilitate meetings without it feeling too forced? I don't know that we found a good answer quite yet. We kind of bounced different ideas and have tried different things, but I think even just trying it, knowing that I want to help my team make those connections, I think is a step in the right direction for them and can start to foster that.
Okay, nice. Do you have any rules in regarding the meetings? So you say everyone needs to be with the camera on, or do you have any rules that you think this is a must because otherwise this is not gonna happen and this is not gonna work?
Yeah, I am not big at forcing camera on. I think there are different types of meetings. Like if I'm having a one-on-one with you, I do like your camera on, but like if you're, I had somebody training for a marathon and she would do a run on her lunch hour and she's like, our one-on-one's right after this. I really don't feel like being on camera. Not a problem. I'm not going to force you to be on camera when you don't want to be. That's not my style. I think the one thing that I found really helpful is sort of this idea of core hours. You'll see it a lot in like tech companies that have engineers kind of scattered in different places that work very solo, but we're all going to work together in core hours. So I have folks in different time zones or folks that take flexible schedules, folks that have young children, so they actually prefer to work a later schedule, an earlier schedule. But what I do is core hours. So we're all generally available from, for example, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can flex from there. Do you work 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.? Do you work 7 a.m. to 3 p.m.? But we're all going to be online roughly in these same hours so that we're collaborating at the same time. That's one thing I feel pretty strongly about. I am not a person that's checking what time you log in the morning. I'm a very strong believer that we are all adults and I'm not here. It's like, you don't need to ask me to go somewhere to do something. Like I'm an adult, you're an adult. I trust you're getting your work done. And if you're not, it'll show in other ways. Me checking what time you log in isn't going to be the answer.
That's the key point. In the Latin American cultures, we say, if you are not seeing somebody, his or her is not going to work. How do you measure that someone is really delivering and is it really investing the time that this person needs? I mean, I'm not saying that needs to be sun to sun and you don't have to sleep and as much stress as I put you, you will be better. No. But how do you measure that you are in the right way and things are going on and it's happening?
Yeah, I think there is always a little bit of an intangible to that, right? Like it's less about knowing when somebody's doing it and more about seeing the flags when they're not. Like there's always like a little bit of either chatter or a feeling from my own team, if it feels like somebody isn't pulling the weight, right? Like all of a sudden, if like they're feeling like they're covering a lot for some person or things are starting to be late or things aren't starting to be there, I think that you see that first. But the thing that I think really stops that is keeping the relationship. So knowing how you maintain the relationship with your team. So if I have a larger team, I recently had a team of, 11 or 12 folks. It's easy to have a pulse on that. But a couple of years ago, when I was with Wayfair, I had a team of 35 people. They obviously didn't all report to me. I couldn't do that. How do I make sure that my managers are good leaders and that they're keeping a pulse? Are we having one-on-ones? And somebody that's not pulling their weight in a one-on-one conversation, they're not going to have much to tell you. They're not going to be bringing you problems. So they may say, oh, everything's great. But it's weird if you have nothing to tell me on a one-on-one. I know our world moves fast. It's frustrating. If everything's cool and you have nothing to report, that feels like maybe there's something going on. Like maybe you haven't done much this week.
Yes. Tell me, which kind of meetings do you have? You have maybe the one-on-one, you have a general meeting. Which kind of meetings do you have? And how do you create this schedule? How do you manage and saying, no, this is going to be this week or this month? How can you manage that?
Yeah, so I usually try, if I have If I have folks like managers or other leaders that report to me, so they manage teams, those are automatically like a weekly one-on-one, because it's like, you are managing multiple people all in my org. Like, we're going to need to have a pulse. But I also don't like to go too long without having an interaction with like what we'd say a skip level person. So somebody that reports to that person. When you have a lot of folks, that's not a weekly, obviously, but I try to, is that monthly? Is it quarterly one-on-one? So I will do team meetings. And I think the cadence of that depends on the team. So I always kind of have a team that's a little bit of like delivery focused. So are they doing scheduling? Are they answering tickets? So there's kind of like a constant measuring of metrics that I always kind of keep weekly, because I just want to know if something's going to go off the rails. And it can be a quick weekly. I am not about, let's all sit for an hour and everybody chat forever. I'm like, what is the agenda we're going through? Like, let's do a quick round robin. How's your world going? Highs, lows, or where are you stuck? Where can I help? And then I try to do with folks I don't see as often, or folks that don't report directly to me but are in my team. I try to make sure I get one-on-one time with them at the very minimum once a quarter. I think smaller teams, you can do it more often. I had somebody out on parental leave. And so with those folks that usually they'd have somebody else meeting, they didn't, I made sure I met with them bi-weekly. That was a little bit different, making sure they have somebody checking in with them one-on-one. I know personally, I like to have a relationship with, not only my leader, but who's above them. And different people are better at that. I've had jobs where that's great, and I knew who that person was, and they didn't know my day to day, but at least they checked in sometimes. And obviously it's tougher at a higher level. That's usually a C-suite member. It's a little different than when you're asking somebody else to meet with you. But I've had teams where, I never saw that leader when I was younger. I never met with somebody above me. And so that's why when I'm a leader, I know that I want those folks to have that exposure. I want to know what types of roles they want to get into. What is the general feeling? How are they feeling? They may not tell me everything because I'm not their direct leader. I don't have that relationship, but I at least want them to feel like I know who they are. I know what they do, and I care about who they are and what they do. Because it's really easy when you're in those levels to feel like you don't matter to the organization, or, nobody knows you outside of your leader, especially in a remote world. So I wanted to keep that one-on-one, but I think it depends on your team. You have to feel out your team, because I am also a person that hates a meeting that could have been an email. I just
one thing talking about that is what I am discovering now is I have my direct reports, okay? And with them, I'm in touch almost every day.
All the time.
I have meetings, one-on-ones, blah, blah, blah. But below them, there's another world, is another ecosystem. And I'm struggling right now in how can I be sure that the things that we are deciding here and the way that we are going to do it and the culture that I want them to have with the team really is working, and really they are doing that. Yeah. Because sometimes it's an illusion. You say everything is going well, because this first people it knows you and tells you whatever you need to listen. Yep. But when I go down this surface, what I encounter the most is they don't really rely to be open enough. It's like, this is the, as you say, this is the C-level, and no, everything is okay. I don't really want to get into some trouble. How can you manage that this information is like for everyone, I don't know if I was...
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think I see that especially when I have teams that are newer to the working world. There is this like, if I say that, am I going to get in trouble? They say they want the feedback, but do they want the feedback? How do I give the feedback without it coming across that way? I think some of it you're not going to solve. There's going to be some people that no matter what you say to them, they are a lockbox. They are never going to tell you.
Embrace it.
But I think there are people that are going to be open no matter what. I think what I have tried to instill is that it starts with me in the way I talk to my team. And this doesn't work in all companies, right? Like, I know that I grew up in the tech industry. That's where I've worked my whole career in tech. Tech tends to be a little more casual. We tend to be more transparent, right? Like, we're not working on government contracts. There aren't secrets. There's certainly things we can't share, but it is a more casual environment. So I do know that I have the privilege of that, but I think it starts with me. I am very transparent with my teams, and I back that up. I tell them things. If I know, we have our goals are in progress, but they're not solidified yet. I've had leaders that would not share that out. They're like, well, it's not solid, so I'm not going to tell them yet. But then your team doesn't know what we're working towards. They don't know what's in flight. They're hearing things. Oh, we might work on this project, but I haven't heard anything, and my, our leader or our leader's leader isn't saying anything. Whereas I don't do that. I want people to know, as long as it's something I can share. I do not share things that I'm told not to be very clear. But if I can share and I say, yep, we are talking about, we might expand into that country, or we might go get this tool, or we might change how we're doing this, or we're looking at these goals, I will tell them what I know. And I'm extremely transparent as I can be with my teams. I'm also transparent with things like my own, how I'm working on things. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what my focus is this week. And I think keeping that a bit more human, or making what I'm doing on a day-to-day more relatable, makes a safer space. Like, they actually know that I am a person. I know what they're working on. I've shared what I'm working on. And I think people get a little caught up when they become leaders and they start to move up. They start to feel like they have to be this formal person, and this is how I lead. And I think that's where you start to build that barrier, is how you present yourself to the team.
How do you handle extrovert people versus introvert people in this virtual world? Because this doesn't mean that someone is more intelligent or not.
No,
more
it doesn't.
capable. How do you handle this?
Yeah. This has been a really hot topic of conversation around like performance review time. There were a few of us that were very vocal in conversations of, hey, it sounds like you might be rating somebody lower because they're not as vocal, because they're not as out there. And, what have you as a leader done to pull that person out, rather than just saying, oh, are they, maybe they're not confident, they're not this, which also, by the way, are buzzwords people tend to use only for women. And so it's something to really think about. I've tried to make that unique to each team. I don't know that or maybe somebody does. I don't know that I have the magic answer of here's what you do. I try to make it unique to each team. Something I try to do is check myself. When work comes down the line, or it's something that somebody needs, oh, I'd love this person to jump out and do this. Like, it's a stretch project. It's a great opportunity. It'll get their name out there. Am I always reaching for the vocal person? Am I always reaching for that? Or am I reaching based on who told me they want to work on something that's, for example, if a data project, I have a lot of folks on my team that are interested in the data world. How can I get them a project in that space to learn that? Am I doing it based on their aspirations, or am I doing it based on the person that speaks up a lot, or that is very like friends with a lot of people? I try to check myself, and I try to make sure I'm giving opportunities for the people that aren't as vocal. But you have to be careful. I did that with somebody on my team of, we need somebody to speak at an all hands. And I threw somebody's name out there because I was like, I really want to get her in front of the team. She is terrified of public speaking. And in her role, she doesn't have to. It's not something she has to do in her job. And that was my bad. I should have double checked. Like, is this person just not going to go after something? Or is it truly now I have ruined their month by asking them to do this? So it doesn't always work. You have to make sure you know your people enough. And we figured it out, and we found other opportunities. And she, did some smaller setting things, but asking her to speak at that all hands, not my best move. She was not happy.
Listen to you. I haven't listening to you. I never thought that maybe to be a leader in a remote is different than a leader in the material world. Maybe we need different skills. Yeah. Some of them maybe are the same, but some others are not. Which ones do you think that we need to develop in a remote world?
I think we need to develop, and it's something I think I am naturally good at, and I naturally have always looked for in my teams, which has been helpful moving to remote. But I think the ability to adapt to the way other people work, or adapt or quickly understand how other people communicate. So when you're in the office, there are kind of like office norms, right? Like everybody does this and everybody shows up to a meeting this way. But in a remote world, it's much easier for people to stick to how they communicate. And if you're trying to work in between teams, expecting other people to know how you communicate and adapt to it is never going to work. So I think not the ability to communicate, that's something everybody needs in every job, but the ability to understand how somebody else communicates and fit with that. So you're going to go work with a team on a project and you don't often work with them. How do you quickly figure out how do they like to be communicated to? You know, I have people at my last company was a very big Slack company, which is great. I love Slack. What I do not love is receiving extremely important documents or extremely long messages over Slack. I'm never going to find them again. And that's something that I wish they learned about me. If you need me to review something and approve it, and it's really important, I'm going to need that in an email. I try to know that about the people I'm working with. If I send you a couple emails and you don't respond, maybe you are a Slack person, or maybe you're not. Maybe you need me to put it on your calendar and you need 10 minutes just for us to chat through it. So I look for people that are willing to solve that puzzle. So when I have to reach out to somebody new or I have to partner, I'm going to think about how they like to be communicated to. There are people that will say, I'm going to set the grounds for communication early. It's a very project management 101 thing of like, I learned how to manage projects. Here's how we're going to communicate. Here's what we're going to do. And that is beautiful, but there is not a single project I've managed where that's actually ever been successful. I think it's adapting and being a little bit of a chameleon and knowing how to talk to people and speak their language.
You touch a very, very important point about tools and timing, because when I am like both. Some weeks I am at the office and some others I am at home.
Yeah,
like today. But when I am at home, when I am not at the office, I think that everyone believes that I'm doing nothing. Like, yeah, come on, this guy is at home, so maybe he's watching TV and
relaxing with a drink,
That's okay. Whatever we need is at any time, it will be okay. How could you balance both things? Tools, because again, mails, thousands of mails. Chats, thousands of chats. So how do you balance tools versus timing? Tools as itself and the balance with the timing.
Yeah, I think it is very close to my role, because my current role is that I do manage the tools for the recruiting process. So like all the technology you use, how do you communicate with candidates? And we talk about that a lot. How many tools is too many tools? How many places are you asking your candidates to go click or your interviewers or your employees? And I think that it's a little different based on the company, right? Like there's, as much as you want to say, I like this, you're a little constrained to what the company you're in uses and what are the norms that came before you. But I think it is a little bit about your team. If your team is, when I have people that are a bit more senior, they're more in like project-y roles, they're kind of working across a lot of teams, I know that their calendars are slammed. So like, how can we start updates that are like, we use a lot of channels. I think have somebody that is good at maintaining that stuff, because I am not. I'll have, a channel that we created for a project that was finished 2 years ago and it's still sitting in my thing and it's in the way. So to have somebody that's good at managing that'd be a great advice. But how do you do updates where your team is going to most see them? Where I have a team that they don't go to a lot of meetings. And so I actually think, rather than trying to do all these updates over Slack, we're just going to do a weekly meeting. It's worth it for me to carve that time out of my calendar and make sure I go. And we're going to have that time. So it is a little bit about reading your team and knowing your team of where it makes the most sense. What I think you have to remember as a leader is like that face-to-face time, whether it's through a screen or you're actually in the office, you can't get rid of that. I think I have, there are some people that say, oh, like I'll cancel one-on-ones all the time. And I always say, I'll move a one-on-one. Like if it's an important meeting, it's an important interview, I will move a one-on-one, but I don't cancel my one-on-one. Some people say I don't move one-on-ones. I want to show it's important. Sometimes that's nearly impossible. Like depends on who it is, but I won't cancel them, because if you get rid of that completely and you're trying to replace that just with instant messages, whatever app you're using, or just with emails or other check-ins, it is going to degrade that relationship. You can't get rid of that completely. I think it's really easy for us to forget, oh, I was on vacation last week, so we canceled the team meeting. And then we were really busy and there was that other one, so we canceled it again. It's really easy to all of a sudden realize you haven't seen somebody face to face in a month.
Yeah. Shame on me.
Yeah. And that's where those relationships and that trust that you're hoping that you have to keep a pulse on your team and keep that culture. It's not just about how your team checks in, it's how you check in. And I think it's really easy for us in a leadership position. I have so many meetings. I'm just going to cancel that one. I'm just going to skip this. I'm just going to, I'll just send a message instead. It's really easy to lose those relationships fast.
Yeah, agreed. Do you agree that the virtual world demands us to be more, as you've been saying during all this time, to really be closer as a person rather than as a company role? I mean, because when you are in flesh and bones in a company, it's like you are there and the company is like that. And I mean, the culture of as you say, in the culture of the company, it feels and it affects everyone. But when you are in a virtual world, there's a difference because you belong to a group, and sometimes you cannot feel the size of your company, but you belong to it. So
I think that we're to be a good leader, to keep that feeling that you had of camaraderie when everyone was in the office, I think you are filling a gap. You're filling a gap that naturally gets filled when a group of humans is all inhabiting the same space for 40 hours a week. You naturally have, at my old job, we had a cardboard cutout that we would all put things on and put notes on. You can't do that in this space. So you have to fill a gap that things just naturally come up. The inside jokes, the things that you all know about each other, you do have to try a little harder. And I think it looks different. I think I probably know more about people in my team's personal lives than I used to because we had this culture in the team, but now I have to try harder. And not like I'm prying into their personal lives, but how do you know what's happening in their day-to-day, what's important to them, what's on their mind? And those are going to be different things because in between meetings, we're not all chatting with each other in the office. In between meetings, somebody's going to change a load of laundry, or they're going to go walk their dog or do something else. And now I have to know about those things. And not I have to, it's a bad thing, but I have to make an effort to know those things. And I will say that was a change. That is not my natural. I personally am not always a sharer. So I also naturally don't ask about those things. And it's something I had to work on when we moved to full remote. I had to work on being better at that connection. You forget everyone's doing it. It's kind of nice to get other views of oh, I'm not alone in this. It is hard for everybody. We are figuring it out.
Mi hijo se lo explicó con plastilina.
Yo creo que la virtualidad es para adultos. Porque realmente, si tú vas a tener un esquema híbrido de trabajo o un esquema en donde tienes virtualidad, pues tienes que entender si tu equipo está lo suficientemente maduro para poder regularse y para poder realmente concentrarse y seguir aportando y seguir dando resultados a la empresa. Hay 5 métricas importantes para medir la eficiencia del trabajo remoto. La primera, productividad individual. Es decir, el número de tareas o proyectos completados dentro de los plazos establecidos. ¿Esta cantidad de proyectos sería la misma que si estuvieran de manera virtual o si estuvieran aquí? ¿Cuántos errores y correcciones son necesarias? ¿No? Es decir, asegurar que la calidad del trabajo no disminuya debido a la virtualidad. Frecuencia y eficacia en la comunicación. Y aquí tiene que ver el tiempo de respuesta y la participación de las reuniones. Yo sí creo que un esquema híbrido ayuda mucho. O sea, ir algunos días y otros no. En esos días que vas, entiendes otra vez dónde perteneces y entiendes la empresa y vuelves como a tener esa cohesión con tu equipo. Ten en tu equipo los que hacen eco con tu empresa y de alguna forma que no te importe en dónde están.
Una última reflexión antes de irnos. Yo venía en el avión y pues yo con mi grupo estudié del 2020 al 2021 el MBA. Físicamente, a muchos de ellos yo los he visto 4 veces en mi vida. No más, físicamente. Pero es impresionante que si alguien del grupo necesita algo, todos están ahí para arroparlo. O sea, ha habido personas que han tenido entrevistas de trabajo y entonces 4 le ayudan a preparar esa entrevista de trabajo. Ese vínculo no se ha hecho de manera física. Ese vínculo se creó y se ha mantenido a lo largo del tiempo de manera virtual. De verdad, yo creo que la virtualidad funciona y funciona muy bien. Pero también creo que la virtualidad es como la moda, lo que te acomoda. A mí no me queda más que agradecerte estos espacios íntimos en los que convivimos. No te olvides suscribirte, activar la campanita si te da tu gana. Pero lo que sí es muy importante, déjanos tus comentarios y dinos qué podemos hacer por ti y cómo podemos hacerlo mejor. Yo soy Calo García y te quiero ver triunfar.
Porque soy tu madre.